Thanks for tuning in to your weekly champ rotation with your hosts, Peter Panic.
The walrus has large orphans, or what?
And Mr. Manslaughter.
I do it in my head all the time.
Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in to your weekly champ rotation. I'm Peter Panic with my co-host, Mr. Manslaughter.
Hello.
And we're coming at you with your Season 2, Week 6 champ rotation. And we're going to kick it off like we always do. We're going to jump right in to Alister, the Monitor. And Cody's going to talk a little bit about Alister's abilities.
Yeah, so Alister has all really useful abilities for a support and a tank, which he is. His first ability is Pulverize, which is a knockup. His second ability is Headbutt, which is a knockback. And these are really the two abilities that make Alister what he is. You can use these abilities in tandem with each other, either going Pulverize, walk behind them, and then knock them back. Or you can Headbutt and then quickly press the Pulverize to dash up to them, do the damage of the Headbutt, and then knock them up. So basically you just rush in and don't allow them to go anywhere. His next ability is a heal, which is very useful because he's a support, and supports should heal their AD carry. That's kind of what they do. And finally, his ultimate is a cleanse that also gives him more attack damage and gives him a lot of resistance to physical and magic. It reduces all incoming damage by up to 70% depending on the level your ultimate is. So great champ. Dave's going to talk a little bit about his build.
Yeah, like Cody was saying, Alister has all the things that you would want on a support and a tank. So what's really great on him is he's going to scale AP, so you might want to build a little bit of AP on him, but really it's kind of wasted. Anything other than like an Abyssal Scepter, you're not going to really want to build him with. But, you know, what you're going to want to do is, when you're playing him, kind of make sure you talk with your AD carry and find out how much healing they're going to need, because you might want to start with a Mana Manipulator. Some people say Dorn's Ring. It just really depends on how you're going to be playing him, but, you know, you're going to build just various items on him. An Aegis of the Legion, like a lot of people build on their tanks as well as their support, just because it gives you that aura. But anything that's going to give you mana, in my opinion, is very good, because Alister tends to, like, pre-level 8, pre-level 9, uses a lot of mana. So you're going to want to get some kind of mana regen on him. Alright, moving on to the next champ, we're going to move into Brand, the Burning Vengeance. I've played Brand a couple times myself. If you watch the show, he's, you know, my second favorite champ, so I've played him a lot. And I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about his abilities, and Cody's going to talk about his build. Basically, we talked about him before, and I'll just run through. His Seer is a skill shot and just kind of shoots a fireball straight out. It's got a range of 900, and it scales at 0.65 ability power. Pillar of Flame is a small skill shot that's kind of like a targetable area, a little AoE. That's, again, range 900 to the center of the AoE, scales at 0.6. And then Configuration is a non-skill shot. It's a targetable spell, and you just kind of set the target ablaze. Does a little bit of damage, not quite as much as the other two, but scales at 0.55, so not quite as much. And then Protoplasm is his ult, and that scales at 0.5, but it's a targetable spell, but it actually bounces to 5 targets. But it can go to champs and also minions, so if you're going to use it, make sure there aren't too many minions around, and it can actually only hit the same champ 3 times. The biggest thing about Bran, I kind of skipped over it, but it's his passive, and all of his spells light the target that they're targeting, or that they hit, ablaze. And that deals 2% of their maximum health for 4 seconds after that they're set ablaze. And also, while they're ablaze, each one of his abilities, his Q, W, and E, also his ult, but not so much with his ult, do something special. So, with Seer, his Q ability, if they're already set ablaze, it's going to stun them. With Pillar of Flame, if they're already set ablaze, it's going to take, that unit's going to take an extra 25% damage. And with Configuration, it's going to explode and light nearby enemies on fire as well. And then Protoplasm, it just bounces faster if someone's ablaze. So basically what you're going to mainly do is, when you're laning 1v1, you're going to set the target ablaze with Configuration, your E ability, and then hit them with Seer to stun them, and then use your Pillar of Flame. And then when you're doing a team fight situation, you're going to use Seer, then Configuration to explode the ablaze all over people, then Pillar of Flame, then Protoplasm. So you just kind of get the idea. It's kind of hard. It takes a little practice to get used to, but it's, we've talked about, I love him. He's one of my favorite champs. So Cody's going to go ahead and talk about the build a little bit.
Alright, so Brand, you're going to build like any other AP carry pretty much. You're obviously going to get your Death Cap. You're going to get probably started Doran's Ring because you got to be aggressive in lane early, as me and Dave always stress. But the rest of your build is going to be mostly dependent on what the other team is. So if they have a lot of AP, you're going to build an Abyssal Scepter. If they're just doing a lot of AoE damage, or you want to do more effective AoE damage, you'll get a Rylai's. If you're having trouble sustaining in lane, a Will of the Ancients is always good. So just remember to be adaptive and just build items with high AP on him.
All right, and moving on to the next champ, we have Caitlyn, the Sheriff of Piltover. Yeah, and I'm going to talk a little bit about her abilities, and Cody's going to talk about her build. But yeah, Caitlyn's, if you guys watch the AD carry video, she didn't quite make my top 5. She's definitely a number 6, but she's gaining a lot more relevancy in the game because of her early lane dominance, because of her auto attack, which Cody definitely talked a lot about during our top 5. But Caitlyn, her abilities are really good for early game, and I guess that's what I'm going to talk about. With her, we'll just jump right into her passive. After every 6 auto attacks, depending on what level she is, Caitlyn's next auto attack is going to deal 150% damage to a champion or 250% damage to a minion. And then if she's actually in a bush, then the shots are going to count as 2. Now, her Q ability is a Piltover Peacemaker. It is just a standard kind of like skill shot, but basically it's one that has diminishing damage as it passes through more targets, and it can get all the way down to a 40% damage dealt, but it actually scales really well. It scales at 1.3 attack damage, so that's going to be good. It does a lot of damage for a early game attack, but then you're going to move right into her W, and those are just her little traps. I'm sure everyone here has hit them, but what she does is she puts a trap on the ground, and she can set up to 3 traps at a time. They last 4 minutes, and if, like, hypothetically you have 3 down, you throw another one down, just the first one that you brought up, that one goes away. And basically it just kind of immobilizes the champion that if she traps for a second and a half, and it does a little bit of damage. It scales with AP. It's at 0.6 AP, so I don't really know if you could build her as such. Cody might talk about that a little bit, but basically you're just going to use it for its functionality. Same thing with her E ability, her 90 caliber net. It's just a slow, and it also kind of knocks her back a little bit, so you can actually use that to jump over small walls. But it just basically, it's a nice slow if you're trying to get away from a champion, because it's also going to slow the champion as well as knock you back. Also, that does damage with magic damage, so it scales to 0.8. So again, Cody might talk about that a little bit. I'm not really sure, but it's it's a nice little ability for the early laning process when you're just going against another AD carry and support. And then her ultimate, which is what really makes Caitlyn shine, is she can target an enemy champ with a huge range, and it's going to lock onto that person. It has a 2-second cast time, but after it shoots off, it's just going to kind of like heat seek and hit them, unless another enemy champion gets in between the shot and the target. So that's a really great ability. The thing about that ability is it scales at 2.0 bonus attack damage, so it actually is going to do a lot of AD, but again, it's kind of easily blocked because of that 2-second cast time. But Cody's going to go ahead and talk a little bit about her build.
All right, one thing right before I get into the build that Dave didn't mention about the Ace in the Hole, her ultimate, is that it provides vision of the target for the entire casting time. So if there's a Twitch in the game, please snipe Twitch. It is very useful to target him with. Alright, and moving on to her build, you're going to build her like most AD carries, but I know Dave's going to disagree with me on this, but you build a Bloodthirster first on Caitlyn, because it gives you more sustain, it has more damage, which will help her abilities scale faster, and since your abilities can't crit because you're not Gangplank, you don't really need that crit chance early in lane, so you'll build like a Bloodthirster first, get a Phantom Dancer, then get your Infinity Edge, and then get another Phantom Dancer. And then if you're going to need Armor Pen, I usually like to build a Black Cleaver, but since you have so many abilities that do damage, Last Whisper tends to be really good because you're trying to last hit someone, even a tank. It'll just shred through their armor and kill them. And it makes it a lot easier to calculate how much damage your ultimate's going to do. That's pretty much it for her build.
And moving on to the next champ, we have Garen, the Might of Demacia! And Cody's going to go ahead and talk a little bit about his abilities. I'm going to go ahead and talk about his build.
Alright, Garen's passive is what makes him such a good sustain character. He regenerates 0.5% of his maximum health per second if he hasn't received damage in the previous 7 seconds. So basically you're just going to want to stay out of the fight for 7 seconds if you're low on health, and After that, you'll get your health back up extremely quickly. His next ability is his Q ability, which is a movement speed buff. And then when you auto-attack someone, it'll do extra damage and then silence the target for 2.5 seconds, which is a really long silence. This ability is really well paired with his E ability. Is Garen spins around rapidly for 3 seconds, dealing damage to people around him. And you're going to want to use this ability right after his Q, because you'll silence them and then they won't be able to get away from you while you're using this ability. His W ability basically just gives him a little bit of tankiness, because every time you kill a unit, you get an additional 0.5 stack of armor and magic resistance, and this goes all the way up to 25 armor and magic resistance. And then active on this ability is you should just decrease all damage taken by a percentage between 20 and 36% for 3 seconds, depending on the level of this ability. And finally, his ultimate is basically a massive sword that comes down from the sky, and it does a decent amount of flat damage, but it also does 1 additional damage per a certain percentage of health the opponent's mission. And this goes from 3.5 to 2.5%, depending on the level. So basically, you're going to want to use to last hit champions, pretty much. I know it sounds like kill stealing, but it's just the way it's going to be, because it does a ton of damage the less health they have. And Dave's going to talk to you a little bit about his build real fast.
Yeah, basically, what we're going to talk about with Garen's build today is more of a attack damage, like we're leaning more towards attack damage than tanky Garen. Now, you're still going to build some sustainability on him, but not until a little bit later. Basically, you're going to start Doran's Blade, get into those boots, get that BF sword, and kind of get an Infinity Edge early on, Frozen Mallet, then something with a little bit of attack speed. Also, that movement speed's going to help you get a Phantom Dancer. Then get an Atma's Impaler, and then maybe something like a Stark's Fervor to give you that a little bit more sustainability, also help your teammates. But like Cody was saying, he's really great at last hitting, and he's going to be able to do a lot of damage. And basically what Cody and I are saying is you can't build him tanky anymore, because he just doesn't have any good crowd control other than that silence, which the silence is great. So we're not saying the silence isn't good, we're just saying that's all he has. So you're going to want to build him more attack damage. Alright, we're going to move on to the next champ. We have Graves the Outlaw, and he looks pretty angry. Looks like he just came from a saloon of sorts. But Cody's going to go ahead and talk about his abilities now. I'll talk a little bit about the build.
Alright, so Graves has a really cool passive for an AD carry. It gives him stacks of armor and magic resistance every time he stays in combat, and it goes up every second for 10 seconds. So at level 16, he has 30 bonus armor and magic resistance if he's in combat for 10 seconds. And this is good because you normally don't build any of that on an AD carry. His Q ability is a buckshot, which is basically like a shotgun blast in front of you. It does damage to all the enemies in the path, and unlike Ash's arrow, it doesn't stop when it hits someone. It will go through and hit everything in the cone. And then if you're really close to someone, it does extra damage, because they can actually be hit by more than one of the projectiles that come out. However, each of these bullets only does 25% extra of the original damage. So theoretically, if you're point blank range, you'll hit someone for 150% damage, which is still a ton, because it scales at 0.8 with attack damage. His W ability is called Smoke Screen. Basically, you throw out a smoke bomb that does a little bit of damage and slows them too. They also have no vision besides what's in the smoke screen during this time. So it's really great to use on a champion like Nocturne, because they'll use their ultimate and then have to have vision to actually use their ultimate. So without the vision, they can't do anything. So it shuts them down pretty much completely. His E ability is called Quick Draw, and this is a dash ability. And you'll basically dash to a target location and then get an attack speed boost right after you use it. This ability is really good for either escaping or getting in range of your buckshot or your ultimate, which I'll get to in a second. And also it gives you that attack speed, so you'll get in range and then do a ton of quick attacks to him to get that high burst damage from him, which really makes him well known as an AD carry. His ultimate is called Collateral Damage, and he basically just fires a missile in a straight line that does a ton of flat damage, and it scales 1.4 with attack damage. And this is on the first target it hits. And then it does cone damage behind the first target for 80% of this damage. And you're going to want to use this to either finish off champions, hit someone in the front of a team fight to get good AoE over everyone. I mean, it really has a ton of uses. You can use it to Baron Steel, stuff like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and pass it off to Dave for his build.
Yeah, I mean, Graves, I know he scales a little bit of AP, but you're not really going to build AP on him. I guess you could build something like a Trinity Force on him, but you're going to want to really basically just do a basic AP carry build. Now, like I said, the Trinity Force is good on him because you're going to get that Sheen proc, and it's nice to be able to use an ability like Dash and then an auto attack to do a little bit extra damage. Also, Phage is going to be great because it's going to be able to slow down enemies a little bit. The Trinity Force is actually a pretty good item on him, but if you don't do it, it's okay. You'll be okay. Just build things like Phantom Dancer, Infinity Edge, Bloodthirsters, and like Cody said earlier, building a Bloodthirster early actually isn't that bad. I definitely suggest, because Cody told me to do this, I don't want to take any credit. Credit's not due. But he suggested that I build at least a Vampiric Scepter early game, and I'm at the point now where I say play 80 carries this way. You know, you get in the game, get your Doran's Blade, then your boots, and maybe just get your level 1 boots, and then get your Vampiric Scepter. You might maybe get, you know, your Berserker Greaves, but you want to get it pretty early because it's going to give you that sustain in lane. Now with Graves, you kind of don't need the sustain lane because he tends to do a lot more damage than other 80 carries, especially with that his E ability. But you know, you're going to build him like an 80 carry. All right, and moving on to the next champ, we have Maokai, the Twisted Treant. Cody's going to go ahead and talk a little bit about his abilities, and I'm going to talk about his build. But I will tell you guys. Well, actually, you know, I'll let Cody tell you. Go ahead, Cody.
All right, we're going to be talking about Jungle Maokai because that seems to be the most viable spot to put him right now. So if you're wondering about our ability order or build, that's what we're talking about. Alright, his passive is what makes him a decent jungler in the first place, and what it does is every 6 attacks, he heals himself for 7% of his maximum health. So this becomes a lot late game when you have like 3,000 health. I'm not very good at math, but I know that 7% of that is quite a bit. His next ability is his Q ability, which is called Arcane Smash. It just is a little bit of a knockback. It does a little bit of magic damage, and it slows them by a little bit. So you're going to want to use this in tangent with his W ability, which is called Twisted Advance. And what you do is you dash up to an enemy, and you snare them to the ground for 2 seconds and do quite a bit of damage to them. So you're going to use this and then go on the other side of them and then Arcane Smash them so they get knocked backwards towards your side of the lane, so hopefully they die. And then his E ability is called Sapling Toss, and what this does is you throw a little sapling on the ground and it will look around for enemies, and then when it finds one, it'll rush up to it and do more damage. Finally, his ultimate is basically an AoE area that you set up where it reduces all damage done to allied champions by 20%, and it costs 30 mana per second, so you're not going to leave this up for too long. And then you can activate this ability again to deal 200 flat damage plus 50% of your ability power plus 2 bonus damage per each point of damage absorbed within your little area, and this caps at 300 damage. So if you leave it up for long enough, theoretically you have 500 flat damage on him, so it's really good to use in team fight. Dave is going to talk to you guys a little bit about his jungling build.
Yeah, basically what you're going to do with him is you're going to start a Doran's Ring, and basically you're going to do that because you're going to be stacking saplings at a camp, and that camp's going to be blue when you're starting. And then you're going to go ahead and get into items like a Rod of Ages. Make sure you get Merc Treads because you're probably going to be in there tanking a little bit of the damage. And items like a Rylai's because, you know, it's definitely going to help him out to slow those enemy champs just with his abilities. So, and he's one of the better junglers if you're looking for that more tanky jungler, which I think we've talked about, I don't know, maybe 1,000 times on the show about how we think that tanky junglers are kind of the way to go. Alright, yeah, we're just going to jump into the next champ, Master Yi, the Wuju Bladesman, and basically I'm going to talk a little bit about his abilities, and Cody's going to go ahead and talk about another little treat that we have about his build. But yeah, Yi, his passive is every 7th attack he strikes twice, pretty basic. And moving on to his next ability, it's Q, it's Alpha Strike, and basically he leaps across, striking up to 4 enemies, dealing magic damage to each enemy with a chance to deal 400 bonus magic damage to minions, which makes him why he can push lanes very well, and that scales at 1.0 ability power. His W is his Meditate, and it's just basically his heal. And the big thing on this that recently was pointed out to me is he actually gets a buff on his armor and magic resistance, and at level 5 it's all the way up to 300, so that's OP because he can just, that's why you can see him sit there and just kind of heal. And his E ability is basically a bonus attack damage buff, and it's passive, but when you activate it, it actually gets doubled. But when it's on cooldown for that 10 seconds afterwards, you don't have the passive attack damage. So something you want to use when you're about to start a team fight, or actually during a team fight, or when you're pushing down towers. And also, everything most people will know is ultimate does, but it's just kind of a buff on attack speed and movement speed, and also he cannot be slowed during this. And also, anytime he kills a champion during the duration, will refresh all of Master Yi's ability cooldowns, while Sis will refresh them by half. Then Cody's going to go ahead and talk a little bit about his build.
Alright, so for his build, I'm actually going to talk about 2 different builds. One being the standard AD, and then I also have to talk about AP because it's just the funnest thing in the world. But if you're just going to play him for your first time this week, I recommend doing AD, Master Yi. If you're just going to build stuff like Berserker's Greaves on him, get a Wriggles maybe, a Zeal with a Phantom Dancer eventually. A Frozen Mallet's really good on him because he doesn't have any crowd control of his own. And then an Infinity Edge, obviously, for that crit chance is really good. So that's just standard. But if you're looking to be adventurous this week, you can try AP Yi. And basically the whole thought behind APE is you're going to utilize his ultimate, which refreshes cooldowns every time you kill a unit, and his Alpha Strike. And you'll basically use your ultimate and then Alpha Strike and hopefully kill someone. Because if you kill someone, you'll be able to Alpha Strike again. And if you build a ton of AP on him, you'll realize that his Alpha Strike actually scales 1.0 with AP, so it does a ton of damage. So you can get off maybe 5 Alpha Strikes in a team fight if you do it right. But if you're going to build him this way, you're going to want to get a Death Cap, a Lich Bane, because that'll proc your AP to help you get a kill in your ultimate. You're going to want to get anything like an Archangel, which gives you a ton of AP. Yeah, just basically anything with a ton of AP. So if you're looking to be adventurous, you can try that out.
Alright, and moving on to the next champ, we have Nocturne, the Eternal Nightmare. Cody's going to go ahead and talk about his abilities. I'm going to talk a little bit about his build.
Alright, so Nocturne's passive is what makes him a good jungler. Every 10 seconds, his next attack does AoE damage for 120% of his physical damage, and he heals himself between 15 and 20 per target hit. So this is really good for like the creep camps in the jungle, because like at Wraiths or something, you'll get 100 health every time this goes off. And basic attacks reduce the cooldown of this by 1 second. So you're going to want to build attack speed on him, because you'll get a bunch more AoE and stuff like teamfight. But I'll let Dave talk about that a lot more in the build. His Q ability, you throw out a trail of dust that if it hits an enemy, it'll stick to them. And then while you're on this trail, you get increased movement speed and increased attack. So you're going to want to use this on an enemy so that they can't get away from you. And also, so you can get off your E ability easier, which is your fear. And basically, you put these little chains onto someone. If you stay near them for 2 seconds, it'll feel the target for up to 2 seconds, depending on the ability's level. And finally, his W ability is called Shroud of Darkness. It permanently gives him attack speed as a passive, but his active on this ability is basically a Banshee's Veil. And if you absorb an ability with this, passive on this ability's attack speed is doubled by 5 seconds. And finally, his ultimate basically makes the entire map go dark, and then he can launch himself towards an enemy champion within 3,500 range and deal damage to them. But the main reason you do this is just to gank and get in range really quickly. And then it also causes massive confusion in team fight, especially on uncoordinated teams. So it's really good to pub stomp with. And Dave's going to talk about his build.
Yeah, basically you're just going to build him heavy AD, also with attack speed. Things like Wriggle's Lantern, especially because you'll be in the jungle, but also you're going to want to get a Frozen Mallet with him, because you're going to get that, not only that huge buff on health, but also the slow you get from your auto attacks. You get a little bit of attack damage with it, but nothing crazy. But yeah, I mean, especially if you're using him in the jungle, you're going to want to build him with these, with a heavy AD, just so you can go in there and slash people up. And moving on to the next champ, we have Xerath, the Magnus Ascendant, and that sounds kind of scary, but basically Cody's going to go ahead and talk about his abilities. I'm going to talk about his build.
Alright, so for his abilities, first of all, his passive is really simple. He just gets 15% of his ability power converted into armor. So this makes him a pretty tanky mage, which is kind of different, but that's very cool. His Q ability, basically just a long skill shot that scales decent with his ability power. I'm going to skip over his W ability for now. You get his E ability, which is called Mage Chain. And this does a little bit of ability power, but when you hit someone with this ability, your next ability will stun them for 1.5 seconds. So you're going to want to use this ability first if you're ever trying to fight someone. Your ultimate is called Arcane Barrage, and you can use this ability 3 times, and it just does AoE damage around the area you cast it on. So it's a skill shot, but it's also extremely easy to hit. Now I'm going to go back to his W ability, and the reason I skip this is it's kind of what makes Xerath Xerath. He anchors himself to the ground for up to 8 seconds, and this increases the range of all his spells by 400 and gives him up to 30% magic pen, depending on his level. And then when he comes out of it, he gets extra movement speed for 2 seconds. The thing about this ability is it gives him a ton of range, so he can stay in the back of team fights. Most people don't realize that you can turn it on and off very quickly to give yourself a 2-second move speed buff, because you only have to wait half a second before deactivating it, and then you can use this to get really easy shots with your ultimate and finish champions off because it has so much magic pen. So with all this in mind, Dave's going to talk about his build.
Yeah, I think I can just say 2 letters. You're going to build him AP. Just build a lot of AP on him. We talked about AP builds before. You're going to want to get, things like Ravidons and Archangel Staff, Rod of Ages, stuff like that. You're just going to build him heavy AP, and it's going to really make you great in team fights, not mainly because their AD carry won't be able to single you out, but that's definitely one reason, because you're going to get that buff from his passive. So other than that, I mean, you're going to build him AP, get Sorcerer's Shoes. Alright, moving on to the next champ, we have Zillean the Chrono Keeper. And we just talked about Zillean a couple weeks ago, so Cody and I said that we're going to talk a little bit more about how to use him, just because we literally, I think it was like 3 weeks ago, we talked about him. And we did this with Ramos a couple weeks ago. A lot of people got a lot of good feedback about that. So, Cody, what do you want to talk a little bit about Zillean?
Alright, first of all, Zillian's Time Bomb got nerfed a little while ago. I still think it's an awesome ability. I played him a couple days ago. Double bombing, which is, if you don't know much about Zillean, basically is your time bomb ability, which is your Q, and then your rewind ability, which is your W, and then your time bomb right again, and you put 2 bombs on top of the same person. Ton of damage. Essentially 1.8 times your ability power. So, great ability.
I've been a big advocate of using Zillean, has an active role as a support champion. It's incredible. He can do damage as a support champion, also help buff his team. And also, you can't put a price on being able to revive a champ that that's going to be dealing a lot of damage, like throwing that on your AD carry with his ultimate. So, I don't know, I think he's really underplayed.
Yeah, he's definitely a situational pick, though, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You're going to want to pick him when you have that character on your team that you just don't want to die. It's kind of like the York thing with Akali. If you have an Akali on your team and you pick a Zillean, their team's going to put so much effort into killing your Akali, only to have her come back to life with a ton of health. So
yeah, I would almost say the same thing for Xerath. If you're playing like a heavy AD team, you're going to want to pick Xerath for your mid. So yeah, it's maybe the theme of the week is situational champ week. I guess that's only 2 of the 8, but I think Zillian's really underplayed, but like you said, situational.
One really cool thing about him also is if you have a jungler that's really good at counter jungling, like an Udyr or Twitch or something, his passive, which gives allies 8% more experience, makes it much easier for them to counter jungle and not get behind it all, and actually get even more ahead, because that time they lose from counter jungling, they get back from the experience buff. And also, you can just do an entire clear, as in blue all the way to double golems, and get level 4. And you don't even have to go back and get wraiths or wolves a second time. So this is really great for having a jungler that can gank at level 4, but not like 1 or 2.
Yeah, and I would say definitely a jungler like Nunu, where you're going to want to get points in his blood boil and everything, and you can't usually get a point into his ice blast until a little bit, level 4 or 5. So I just wanted to talk about Nunu.
I know you did. In case Dave edits this out, he loves Nunu.
I'm not going to edit any of that out. I just want to talk about Nunu. I think Nunu's on the uprise of the brand new junglers, by the way. I think that he is going to be the jungler soon because of his AP scaling. But that's a whole different show. So yeah. Alright, thanks for tuning in this week, and as we do every week, we're going to talk about who do you think that everyone should learn how to play this week, Cody, and soon enough, maybe sometime this week, we're going to do the 10 champs everyone should know how to play, but go ahead and say who you think the people should learn this week.
There are so many good champs this week.
I agree. You must. There can only be one.
There can only be one big Xerath, because Xerath's freaking sweet. Okay. Honestly, though, I've played him before, not too much, but he's so much fun to play. Mm-hmm. He's just so different. He's like Ari, but still, he's worth it.
All right, and in true fashion, I'm going to say play Graves. He's got a lot of a lot of attack damage to him, and he does a lot of damage. It's fun to play, and maybe try to play him as a sustained top and hope that you're not playing against somebody like Irelia. But if you're playing against somebody like GP, you might have a chance. So, play Graves. All right, and that's going to wrap us up for this week. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week, and stay frosty.